heard a misleading story, and it was far from trivial. And I admit, it bothered me for many years. Inviting this story into my life, and I obviously didn't know any better at the time, turned out to be some very tricky business. The irony is, the whole point of the story was to help me grow, to help me develop myself into the person who I thought I ought to be, but instead, I ended up losing myself in the process. Now, I'm not the only person to have been misled by this story. I'm certainly not that outstanding. And I don't have a monopoly on this feeling anxious and confused thing. This particular narrative has managed to throw a wrench into many people's lives. I'll tell you the story as I heard it. Before exiting our mother's womb, we were in a good place. It was a place of wonderment, a place of splendor. There was no reason to feel either empty or broken. It was a place where we felt whole and complete. But little did we know, everything was soon to change. The moment that we were issued into the world, one of Hashem's messengers came and gave us a little pop on the lip, and then the world as we knew it disappeared. It got lost. What kind of birthday present is that? A big part of this story is that they told us not to worry, that we could find this amazing place again. It all comes down to the dissemination of information, they said. As long as we talk to the right people and learn the right things, we may regather this valuable information and inculcate it into our lives, into our very being, from the outside in. With everything lost, in order to become the people we truly want to be, on the surface, it does appear that this is our only recourse. Now, I don't have to tell you how exhausting it is to have to relearn all this essential stuff. And it doesn't help when we have burning questions that it's not always clear who to turn to. And when just starting on our path, most of us don't have the tools necessary to acquire this most valuable information all on our own. Let me tell you why this old story is so misleading, and it's downright ridiculous if you think about it. And that's because before the first utterance, the first semblance of creation, before Hashem actualized the physical world, there was already something else. Something already had taken place. There was a thought. Hashem had a good idea. It was his Torah. And he enjoyed it so much that the Midrash states that like a child frolics with his favorite toy, Hashem played with his Torah for over 2,000 years. What a joyful and precious thought it must have been. The idea was so good, he wanted to share it. He wanted to share his way of thinking with humanity. But you can't just create a human being alone. We need a world to live in. So how did he go about doing this? How was your world created? Hashem gazed deeply into his initial idea, and then he gathered together the raw, ethereal thinking material, and then he used it to construct a fitting world for in which us to live. And how did he create us? He dug his fingers under this ethereal earth, this primordial matter that was enriched by his initial thought, and shaped it into the form of a human being. He blew the Nishmas Chaim, the breath of life, into our nostrils, and once we were standing on our 2 feet, he called us Tzelem Elokim. This is how we were created in Hashem's image. Are you ready for the real story? Before we were born into the world, we were basking in Hashem's oneness. There's a place of wondrousness, a wholeness, completeness. It was Gan Eden. But after being exiled from our mother's womb, we then received a patch on the lip, and we forgot it. But it wasn't lost. It was just hidden. It was covered up by the schmutz inherent in the physical world. That good idea, that first thought and all the important information embedded in it, it's still here. It's inside of us. We were fashioned by it. When we learn the right stuff and we turn it over and over again, we're not replacing what's been lost. We're revealing what's already there. And when we remove layer after layer of the worldly schmutz, we're able to tap into the experience of this earliest memory. I mean, that's how memory works. We can only remember something if we once knew it. We can only recall something if we've experienced it once before. This means that at any given point we may consciously connect to that initial image of ourselves. We may touch base with the person who we've always been and will continue to be. It may be hard for us to see through the schmutz at times, but when we take an inside-out approach, we're able to place Hashem's good idea back into the world, breathing life into ourselves and into the people around us. That makes us the most ideal vehicle for the worldly realization of Hashem's first thought. Hello.